Hello and welcome to another episode of Statford Bridge, Chelsea by the numbers. We're coming at you after a very fun and very tense game. Chelsea beat Newcastle 2-1 at Stamford Bridge. And we're at the quarter point of the season, so we'll talk about the game, we'll talk about the result, we'll talk about what it means. But we are far enough in now that we are firmly in the regime where XG and the predictive stats really mean something. But we are not far enough along that we should just be looking at goals, right? Like that generally comes kind of at the 3/4 mark of the season. And I think there's some pretty cool stuff to talk about. Chelsea are almost perfectly on pace for 70 points, which is fun. We'll see how it goes. So we're not going to talk too much about the game specifically beyond that. Like Chelsea were not great at home, but they were good enough to win. So if we kind of look at the stats, it's a 1.8 to 1.6 XG game for Newcastle, but Chelsea have a shot differential. They have a box touch differential. It's 26 to 22, something like that, or 32 to 26. And like 60% of their XG comes from one chance, and then another like 30% comes from two headers that are really not like amazing chances. The Isak header is quite good, the one that gets blocked on the line by Reece James, but other than those two moments, they really give up basically nothing. Chelsea's goal comes off of an excellent semi-transition moment, kind of Chelsea win it in their box. They play out through Cole Palmer, who plays just an insane pass to break the line and ends up in a Neto square for a good Jackson finish. They have Neto hits the post off a header. They have kind of a couple other like decent but not amazing chances. Cole Palmer scores a goal that's ruled offside. Mudryk has a quite good chance on a cutback that he should do better with. But it wasn't like amazing, right? Like 1.6 is not great. But Chelsea are winning for most of this game. And Chelsea, as we have kind of repeatedly said this season, as Chelsea have made tactical choices when they're winning that lets teams accrue volume against them. Like when Chelsea are winning, they play in a very game-statey way. But when they are losing, other teams have sometimes, but less than the degree that Chelsea have. But ultimately, really the big takeaway here is that Chelsea won. That's really the only thing to take away from this game. That and that Reece James played 90 minutes, the majority of which at left back. I'm not going to get into the tactical stuff too much because I want to talk about kind of the bigger picture things. If you want to see the tactical stuff, it's on the stream recap. It's only an hour, but we got the board out. We looked at why Reece James played left back and what that means, and whether we might see it moving forward, but kind of the wrinkles stemming from that. The too long don't watch version is that I liked it. It keeps Colwill in the middle of the three to build. I think it's good for saving his hamstrings. I think it's much better for Gusto. I kind of get how it works. And it gets Palmer on the left side of the pitch as a 10 and keeps him away from Madueke, which I quite like. But listen, we're at the 1/4 point, and I don't want this to be like a 45-minute marathon episode, so I think it's important to kind of get into where we're at for the season. And there's a few things I want to talk about. So first off, if we compare against the same 9 opponents, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. If we compare against the same 9 opponents, from an expected goals standpoint, Chelsea are almost twice as good in terms of expected goal difference. They are gone from a -3 to a +8 goal difference, if we look over here. Their expected goal difference is up from, or the expected goals for is up from 15 to 17, not a huge difference. Their expected goals against are from 11 down to 10, not a huge difference. To the point that I would say these numbers are more or less the same. Shot volume is a little bit up. Shot volume against is a little bit down, to the tune of kind of per game going from a -2, 1.5 to 2 team to a +1 team. That might be real. It was nice to see the shot volume difference come up here. And then much fewer box touches allowed and a little bit more box touches for. And that's nice. I've added a whole bunch of other stats that are more style stats than they are like predictive of winning. Expected threat difference from Current Sing, which I got from the Mark Stats website, which is super good. I highly recommend it. That is also somewhat predictive of winning, but the other ones here, PPDA, OPPDA, build-up completion, stuff like that, those are more style stats than they are winning stats. But it gives us an interesting picture, right, where we see from an expected points perspective, Chelsea are playing basically the same as last year. Basically the same in terms of quality. What I will say, if we look at the 25% mark, so not necessarily these games, but the first 9 games Chelsea played last year, what we see are a few differences. We see Chelsea are somewhat less pressy, right? So lower passes per defensive action means that you are pressier. We see that in opponent build-up completion as well. Last year, the opponents were completing 80% of their build-up versus us, whereas we are now they're competing 82%. Not a huge difference, but a difference nonetheless. Our build-up completion is the exact same. However, our build-up is the exact same despite being pressed way more. Going from 17 to 12 is basically going from not pressed to pressed in the average game that Chelsea play. And if we think about all the games that Chelsea played this year, Man City pressed them, Wolves pressed them, Palace didn't press them, Bournemouth pressed them, West Ham didn't really, Brighton did, Forest didn't really, Liverpool did, Newcastle did. Whereas you compare to last year, not really any of these teams pressed Chelsea aside from Liverpool, Brighton, and Bournemouth, and City a little bit, but much less so than it was this year. And field tilt we see is a little bit higher this year, so kind of the degree of possession in the opposition half. And then in terms of the possession losses, we don't have a number for this last year. The Mark Stats website didn't track it last season, but is this year. Chelsea are negative on this, which is not great. And we have seen Chelsea have been somewhat susceptible in their build-up this year. But they have something like the 3rd highest build completion rate in the league, which is really nice. And something like the 3rd highest build completion rate in the league behind Southampton, Spurs, and City, so 4th, I guess. But basically, Chelsea are probably a little bit better. That's what we can say based on 9 matches, is that Chelsea are probably a little bit better than last season. And that doesn't feel amazing. But what I will say to you is this, is that through 9 matches, Chelsea are probably a little bit better than they were last year by the quarter mark. They're maybe somewhat more than a little bit better if we go by the same opponents. And it's very hard to judge, right? Because some of these games are like very different context of when they occur in the season and what's going on and competitions and injuries and availability and like very, very different context, right? So it can be hard to compare directly. And like Chelsea take red cards in some of these games, and there's penalties that have them in the lead that aren't in my non-penalty expected goal stuff. So it's hard to be apples to apples here. But Chelsea are somewhere between a little bit better and mildly better. And if we look at kind of the points projections based on the games we played last year, we're projecting to be something like 6 points better. Luckily, Spurs are flat, Villa are down, which is nice for us, but we'll see about that, and we'll talk about that. But stylistically, it's quite different, right? A little bit less pressy, been pressed more. But interestingly, Chelsea have played the 2nd hardest schedule in the league as of today. So between Newcastle, City, Liverpool, Forest, Palace, Brighton, they have played the 2nd hardest schedule. way above average, right? Like if the average is something like 50%, way above. Wolves have had by far the hardest schedule, but we have had the second hardest schedule. Bournemouth, again, another tough one, right? Like this is not, Chelsea have not had an easy schedule based on the quality of teams they have played so far this season. We have United next weekend, and then you have Arsenal, so another 2 tough games. But then after that, you have Leicester, you have Southampton somewhere in there, you have Brentford somewhere in there who are fine. You have Ipswich somewhere in there. Like, you haven't played any of the relegated teams yet, or the promoted teams. Sorry, there's a little Freudian slip. You haven't played any of the promoted teams yet, who could be quite difficult. So, are quite soft. So, I think given the teams Chelsea have played through 9 matches, given the results and the performances, like critically, Chelsea are +5 on points from where they were last year. And we know that Chelsea kind of racked up points really in the back half of the season. You're pretty happy with that through 9 matches. Like, it's pretty difficult for me to be mad about that. If Chelsea were to duplicate these 9 matches through the next 9 and the next 9 and the next 9, you'd finish with 68 points, which might not get you top 4, but is probably going to get you at least 5th, which is probably going to be good for a Champions League spot given the way the coefficients are going to work out this year. At the same time, given Chelsea's difficulty of schedule so far, I would suspect that Chelsea will put up more than 17 points in their next 9 matches based on the balance of performances. Now, maybe Chelsea get a little bit unlucky and they put up 17 X points and they only put up 15 points in the next one. It happens. It could totally happen. But I'm pretty comfortable, without being definitive, that Chelsea are probably 6 to 10 points better than last year. I'm pretty confident about that. Maybe 5 to 10 if I wanted to kind of take the handlebars off. And maybe the most fun thing to talk about is, are Chelsea a counter-attacking team? And Chicago Dimitri dropped a banger of a tweet yesterday saying, for everyone arguing whether we're a possession team or a counter-attacking team, you can stop arguing. We're both. I worked on Symmetrics today, and Chelsea are top 5 in the league in both fast break possessions and patient build-up possessions. Fast break possessions are possessions where we had a shot or touch in the box 15 seconds after taking a touch in our 40% of the pitch. So basically, you win it deep, and it takes you more than 15 seconds to get into their box or shoot. Less than 15 seconds, and patient ones take you 8 passes. So there are some possessions that are going to be both. But I think this is a really good style metric. And Dimitri and I have talked about this a lot, which I think is great. Regardless, we're going to take a short break here, and then we're going to come back for the pod listeners, video listeners. We're going to go straight, and then we're going to get into that data specifically. Alrighty, here's what we have. So first off, Dimitri hooked me up with this, which is great. Last year, so this is 2023, 2024 on the left, 24, 25 on the right. And I'm going to type that so I don't forget, and it's visible. Okay, so on the left, Chelsea last year were the second most fast breaky team in the league behind Liverpool. This year, Chelsea are the most fast breaky team in the league. If we look at the fraction of possessions that are fast last year, or attacking opportunities, we'll call them, because it's both shots and box entries. If we look at the fraction of them, last year was about half. That seems vaguely middle of the pack for the Premier League, right? Because there are teams who have the ball a lot less, who have to be more transitional. Whereas there are teams who have the ball a lot more, like City, who are not transitional at all, or Arsenal, who are very not transitional in terms of the fraction of attacks they have. This year, Chelsea are 57% of their attacks are fast attacks. So they're getting there in fewer than 15 seconds. Okay? And 15 seconds is not that fast, but bear with me. What does this mean? Well, one, Chelsea are transitioning basically as much as they did last year. These are, like, given we've only played 9 games, basically the same number. What is interesting to me is that in terms of possessions that are both a deep, patient build-up and a fast break, Chelsea have the second most of these in the league. Okay? Whereas last year they were also second most in the league. And what I think is very true for this team, both under Mauricio Pochettino and under Enzo Maresca, is that Chelsea have been a team who win the ball deep and very quickly string passes together to break forward. Whether that is quick combination, whether that is direct, whether that is like into a 9, bounce, 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 or into a 1v1, take your pick. But I think this is true of both teams, that Chelsea have been not a counter-attacking team in the sense that they win the ball and it is one pass forward, but in the sense that they break quickly, whether that is using a deep build to do it or a possession regain to do it, a quite fast attacking team for a team as good as they are in the table. Now, I would say if you look at all of these numbers in 2024 and you compare it to 2023, what you're going to say to yourself is those numbers look a lot higher as a proportion. And you're totally right. City and Arsenal, for example, Arsenal are much higher than they were last year, right? For example. So, and you have teams like kind of the bottom of the table teams like Southampton, who are not in here, are also like none of the promoted teams or relegated teams are in here because they don't have both seasons. But you have teams who are going more. They're playing more. They're slower to build up more. Teams are also much less pressy this year than they have been in previous years. So I think when we look kind of at the macro picture, are Chelsea a counterattacking team? The answer to that is like yes. But they are also a deep build-up team. And the reason I think so many Chelsea games feel so transitional is because even when their deep builds go well, it usually is short pass, short pass, short pass into long pass to break a line, and then we accelerate. It's not slowly make our way up the field, up, 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 we gain 5 yards, up, up, rhythmic slow. It's not like that. It is very often, we play deep, we play deep, we play deep. You bring another number to press. You bring another number to press. Oh, into Jackson, rolls the center back, we're gone. So like you look at the Palmer goal that's ruled offside, and that goal feels super transitional because it is pass into Jackson, roll through ball, and you go 80 yards in 2 passes. But really, that comes from settled possession. You look at the Jackson goal. Chelsea win the ball in their 18-yard box. They make 2 passes, then into Palmer, who turns and then plays the through ball to go 70 yards, square goal. Because Newcastle have sucked so many players forward to press or counter press that boom, you're gone. You're into this 2v2, 2v1, 1v0 situation. And so I think when we're talking about style, I think people get very hung up on like, what is the identity? Are we a transition team? Are we a build-up team? Like Enzo Maresca is a liar because we counterattack and don't pass backwards all the time. No. Listen, the reality is every team in the Premier League does all of the things. There is some nuance to like what you want to do, but if you win the ball in the opposition 18-yard box, you're going to go shoot. You're going to counter. You win the ball in transition in situations to counter, you're going to counter. If teams come press you like Brighton with all their players in your half, you're going to kick it over their heads. That's how everyone plays. At the same time, if teams sit off you, you're going to pass it around and circle and try and break them down and be smart. I think there were moments where Chelsea were really good today, pinning Newcastle back and circulating and playing through the lines and playing through the gears and up and down and swing. And we've seen that loads of times this year. The Palace game was a perfect example of that, where Chelsea were oppressive. And I think that's kind of tough to balance. And I will say another thing that I think kind of falls into this is we get back to the game state conversation with this team, where, for example, if I'm to look at this game before Chelsea concede, Newcastle get basically nothing of value. They get one blocked Harvey Barnes chance, right? Nothing great. Then they get their great goal because Chelsea have gone 1-0 up. You look at the second half, Newcastle get basically nothing other than like one kind of dangerous header. But again, they're all after Chelsea go 2-1 up, where Chelsea kind of drop off. They go through the gears. Like, you look at the possession in the second half. First half, Chelsea have 60% of the ball. Second half, Newcastle have 60% of the ball. Did I was about to call Eddie Howe Emma Hayes. Did Eddie Howe change something tactically to generate the ability to retain so much more of the ball? Or did Chelsea make tactical concessions, given the state of the match, that Newcastle had lots of the ball? To me, it's the latter. Not that Newcastle didn't do a great job with their press. I thought they were very good today. Chelsea were like 80% build-up completed, which is very low for them on the season. It might be their second lowest. I think the Bournemouth game is the only one that's lower. That's true of the match, though. And so when we think about, if we go back, Chelsea have been winning much more this year compared to last year. Like, I can go back, plus 11 goals, plus 5 points. Chelsea have been winning in terms of minutes way more. I could probably pull these numbers and see by date, like, how many minutes Chelsea have been winning, losing, drawing compared to last season. I bet you we've been winning way more compared to last year. So when you factor that in, like, of course Chelsea have been a little bit more transitional this year. And I don't think anyone thinks that's a bad thing, right? Like, it is absolutely a good arrow to have in the quiver. We have not seen a tremendous amount of Chelsea having to break down deeper, more rigid, less aggressive defensive schemes. The two games they've had to are Palace and Forest. Palace, they were very successful, just ball doesn't go in. Forest, they were somewhat less successful. I don't even think that's true. I think they were pretty successful in that game, and the ball didn't go in either. But we will see. We will see how this team is going to line up, how this team is going to break down some blocks, because they're going to face a lot more. Some teams who are going to defend a little bit deeper coming up. But that's where I'm at. Through a quarter of the season, I'm pretty positive. I'm not hugely positive, but I think this team is definitely as good as last year. Probably, almost certainly a little bit better. Probably, maybe somewhere between that and mildly better. 5 to 10 points. 10 being really, you'd be really happy. 5 to 8 is probably the most likely. But that's where we are, man. That's where we are. Andre Santos scored a brace, did the gritty, popped the collar. It's pretty hard to be mad at that. I just want to say thank you to Dimitri for putting this data together for me, because I think this is really informative. And I think these style type metrics, right? Like, if I come back to here, I think these are really good touchstones to see how you're doing as a team and how the message is coming across, but also, like, what is the coach trying to do? Where, like, some people have been critical, like Seb has talked about, like, well, Maresca is saying one thing about wanting to be aggressive and control the games and be on top of it, and, like, they're not really doing that with the ball, and, like, that's objectively kind of true. But, and I just realized that was probably cut off, so it is what it is. But listen, I think, like, it's kind of true that, like, Chelsea have not had nearly as much control of the ball as they did last year. Like, I'm sure if I pulled up the possession table, it's down compared to last year. At the same time, Chelsea have been playing mostly with a lead, and their defensive numbers and their box touch allowed numbers are all better. So there's some squaring of that has to be done. And I think the reality is, like, Chelsea have been more conservative defensively. This is very clear in the style numbers. And I think that has probably benefited them a little bit. And I think that's a good place to leave it. So we've got Newcastle midweek. There'll be a pod after that. We've got United next weekend. Big one. Big one. That's another one. Like United away last year. I think it's away. United away last year was a disaster. Yeah, it is away. And it was what probably Chelsea's worst performance of the season. Like the year-over-year comparison, just don't get blown out, and the year-over-year comparison is going to look insane. Because I think it was like we gave up 5 XG to 1 or something like that. That's a big one. You win that one, and all of a sudden you're 9 points clear of last season. And you've beaten 2 teams that are chasing you for European places. I think that is a really, really critical game. I'm very curious to see what happens with the lineup midweek with different bodies, different people. We'll see where Newcastle are at, given they have some injuries as well. But that's it. We'll leave it there. Thank you all for listening. If you're liking the pod, share the episodes, share the YouTubes, like them, comment, subscribe, whatever. And if there's something you want to talk about, if there's stuff you want to talk about, like we last episode midweek, we talked about Tyreek George and his potential solution to shot volume issues. Today, Pedro Neto gets a shot at the back post, which was nice. I think he took 3 shots today, which is better than Jadon Sancho. If there's stuff you want to talk about, hit me on Twitter, hit me on Blue Sky, hit me on YouTube comments, whatever you want. And if it's interesting, we can talk about it. So we'll leave it all there. Enjoy your week, and we'll hear from me on Thursday. Alrighty, take care.